There are still a lot of ifs, but if Andy Burnham wins the Markerfield by-elections on June 18, he is highly likely to succeed the current Labour Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Yet, 10 years after Brexit, is Britain even governable? Could the anti-migrant violence and riots, stirred up by figures like Elon Musk, as recently witnessed in Belfast, become the new normal in the UK? And could Nigel Farage actually become Prime Minister? I'll explore these questions and more with Stephen Fielding, Professor Emeritus of Political History at the University of Nottingham. Listen to our conversation. Stephen, I want to talk more broadly about the current state of British politics, but let me start with what we have witnessed in Northern Ireland. A man from Sudan brutally attacked another man, and what followed has been described by many as anti-migrant pogroms. And you also wrote on Blue Sky, it's quite some honor to be the richest racist in the world. Of course, this was a reference to tweets by Elon Musk, who was stirring up tensions. How concerned are you that anti-migrant violence could become, and I'm not sure whether this is the right term, but could become almost the new normal in the UK?
There's a danger that it might be. They are increasing in frequency, and expressions of anti-immigrant racist ideas, now they're commonplace on many British streets. There were various people that were putting up St George's flags and Union Jacks across many British streets in those areas that Reform most notably are known to do well in. And they were all put up about a year, 18 months ago, and many of them are still there. They're all looking battered and a bit forlorn. But this is part of a wider process of public sort of demonstrations by a minority. I mean, the people who put up the flags, the people who are committing these terrible acts, are a very small minority of usually committed, active racists. They're not ordinary people expressing their legitimate concerns. But the danger is that these acts are being projected not just by Elon Musk and on his X platform, but by politicians in Reform. And Reform has got a rival to its rights, Restore, but also a bit more carefully, but still there, the Conservative Party. And also in our right-wing media, the conventional right-wing media, as well as the BBC, which reports these things, because basically the BBC reflects sort of ideas of what they think is normal through the right-wing media. And so there is a danger that these acts become seen to be more and more legitimate as we go forward, because there is, at the core of it, there is, amongst the majority of the British public, concerns about immigration, which have been pandered to and not challenged by a variety of politicians. And this particular government has essentially pandered to them while talking sometimes a good talk about immigrants' contribution and all of that to positive contribution. But nonetheless, there's this pandering. So there is this fear that things are just going slowly but surely in a certain direction.
You mentioned Reform, you mentioned Restore more on the far right. There are figures like Tommy Robinson sitting with Elon Musk's father in Moscow. And of course, Musk is some kind of a figure that is quite prominent in far-right circles in the UK. Why is that so?
Because he gives them a platform. He gives them a platform on X. He gives them money. He gives them money for all those tweets, which then get all, retweets and whatever else. And they are actually making money. The leader of Restore, who was an MP in Reform until he fell out with Nigel Farage, because he has to do returns because he's an MP, I think makes something like up to £20,000 a month through his tweets, which are promoting, very, very nasty attitudes towards immigrants and promising to, kick out people who've been long-standing and legitimate presence in this country. So I think he gives them a platform and he gives them money. And eventually, so that's it.
By the way, if China or Russia would do the same thing as Elon Musk is doing now, it would be a clear foreign interference. How is it seen in the UK, what Musk is doing?
People like me, people who are sort of concerned about our politics and study our politics, we are very concerned about it. I mean, Elon Musk is not a popular figure in the United Kingdom more broadly. He definitely is not. I mean, partly because of his associations with Trump, who is desperately unpopular. But this government, the Labour government, is seemingly not taking any action against Musk. I mean, they're using his platform for government information. Most Labour MPs are on it. Despite all the evidence that it completely distorts what people think, it is not a reflection. And it's basically, like I've said, it's a place for the far right to promote their ideas and to get money for it. And even if you're on it and you're trying to put the alternative case, the algorithm means you're not getting your voice through. It's completely distorted. So many people are quite concerned that Musk was promoting the events in Belfast and has done, like Southport last year and other occasions. And individual people that have done similar things to him in this country have found themselves in prison for promoting all kinds of violence against other people and all of that. And yet we hear that government is not going to take any action against Elon Musk for his tweets and retweets for this particular event, which is concerning. Now, some people are explaining this because of the wider agenda of the government. It wants to keep in with these powerful figures because of AI and all these other things, and they're afraid still of being looked at as being a government which is against free speech and get attacked by J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. I mean, they'll get attacked by J.D. Vance and Donald Trump anyway, and have done. So it is slightly head-scratching why the government isn't doing anything, because these people, I mean, Musk in particular, but not just Musk, is mobilizing support for the very things which many Labour MPs, Keir Starmer, condemned those actions in Belfast. And yet Musk is an engine for promoting those kinds of acts. It's a paradox which many people can't really explain, other than, as I've said, they think the government must have a wider agenda, but that wider agenda isn't working anyway.
So what's your explanation?
Well, it is because they hope the agenda will work. They see money in AI, they see money in data centers, they see employment, they see dynamism in the British economy, that the AI is something we can't do without. And if we're outside of the loop, the British economy will not grow. And growth, at least it was, and it obviously still is, without any real evidence it's working, growth has always been the ostensible main objective of this Labour government, because economic growth, in terms of the logic, means they can raise more in taxes, they can spend more on public services, and everyone's going to be happy. But so AI and growth is probably the primary explanation. But still, first of all, that growth is going to take a long time to come. Maybe AI is not going to be the great, wonderful utopia rather than a dystopia. But the other thing is that right here and now, there is a present danger to our democracy, generally, and also specifically to the fate of the Labour government, which is tied in with all of this. And yet they seemingly are not taking a proactive political step to address that problem.
So let's talk about UK politics more generally. The current narrative is that if Andy Burnham wins the by-election in Makerfield on June 18th, he will challenge Prime Minister Keir Starmer for the Labour leadership, and that he has a good chance of ousting him and becoming the next Prime Minister. Do you think that this is what is going to happen?
Firstly, there's a number of ifs. The constituency that Burnham is contesting is not the easiest. There are no easy constituencies for the Labour Party now anyway, but this was never one of the easiest. It won with a fairly slim majority, even in the last election. It's one that it went for Brexit 10 years ago. Reform has done very well in local elections. So that's a big if, right? So, and if he doesn't win, then all bets are off. I've no idea what happens. But if he does win, he's made it very apparent that that is his intention, to challenge Keir Starmer. The last few days, Keir Starmer has made it very apparent that if Andy Burnham is elected, he is not going to step down. He's not going to give him coronation. So he just walks into number 10. That's what he's saying at the moment. And also, there is Wes Streeting, the former health secretary, who has resigned from the cabinet because he says he doesn't believe in what Starmer is doing. So there may be a contested election. But I think the odds are more on Andy Burnham becoming the Labour leader. The question is how quickly, because if there's a contest and Starmer decides to stand, that could go on for months. That could drag on to September, because it takes a long time for the Labour Party to decide these matters, because it involves every member voting and all of that. And if Wes Streeting is involved, again, it's going to take a long time. So yes, that seems to be where many people think that's the direction of travel. But quite what state the party will be in when Andy Burnham does become Prime Minister, and maybe I'm anticipating your next question, quite what difference an Andy Burnham premiership will make, that's very moot.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to ask first, because what is the main difference between Burnham and Starmer, both stylistically and politically?
One of the advantages that Andy Burnham has got is that he isn't Keir Starmer. One of the other advantages that he's got is that, at the very least, he's a more relaxed public performer. He's used to, talking to a camera and putting things on social media. He's very comfortable doing that. But then Keir Starmer is famously unable to appear human when he's talking to journalists and being on TV or whatever. So he's got that. And he's got a certain reputation, which I think is rather ill-deserved. But he's got a reputation as being standing up for principle because of his position as Labour mayor in Manchester, that he seems to be more rooted in outside of London, outside of Westminster, although he was an MP in 2005 for 10 years or so. So that's all been forgotten about. So he's got quite an amenable persona. He's got a certain positive reputation, and he is seen to be to the left, to be more Labour than Keir Starmer. And he is believed to be the Labour politician who can do what is absolutely necessary for the Labour Party, which is to get back all of these lost votes, which have gone to the Greens and the Liberal Democrats, or to the just non-voting, which have been lost since the general election. Because that is the basic problem for the Labour government. It's the strategy that Starmer pursued, which was to try to win back what we might call traditional left-behind voters that had drifted to the Tories at one point, to Boris Johnson, and to now Reform, that very strategy didn't win back many of them. In fact, they've continued to drift in a little way. But by following a very anti-immigrant kind of policy, an anti-refugee policy, very harsh kind of policy, it's put off lots of people who've gone now to the left. So people believe that Andy Burnham somehow will be able to get those people back. During the course of this campaign to win this by-election, because it is a very reform-inclined, Brexity kind of a constituency, Burnham has started to talk in terms that sound very familiar to people about this is what Keir Starmer is saying. He's even said that he thinks that Nigel Farage has said some true things. He agrees with some of the things Farage has said, which is kind of a bit of a warning sign that this is a man who'll be able to attract Green voters back to the party. But this is what he brings, some kind of hope that he'll be more Labour, get back more traditional Labour voters on the left, and just give it a sense of direction it just does not have at the moment.
Do you think that there is a possibility that if Burnham wins, he can sit with Starmer and they can somehow iron out their differences, not to start a civil war within the Labour?
I don't think there'll be a civil war. All the evidence that we have is that if it goes all the way to an election and it goes out to the members are going to vote for Andy Burnham. So it's not really a civil war. It just keeps the agony going for a little bit. I don't think that Starmer and Burnham can work together, but politicians have been able to do that. But on the basis that Andy Burnham is really being voted for in the constituency in Makerfield, primarily on the basis that he's going to become the next Prime Minister, I think it would be bizarre if Burnham somehow then decides, I'm going to come and have a deal with Keir Starmer. So I think that's unlikely, but funny things do happen in the Labour Party, so you can never say no, but I think it's not particularly likely.
Coming back to what we have been talking about at the beginning, do you think that if Burnham is a Prime Minister, he will be tougher on people like Elon Musk or maybe even President Trump?
I think some of the people in the Labour Party that look to him hope that he will be. I think that anyone who becomes Labour leader that wants to at least avoid a drubbing at the polls and at least wants to try and put up some defences to British democracy in general certainly has to take on Musk and the social media virus that is affecting everything and promoting these ideas. They're not creating these ideas. That's the thing, they're legitimizing them. They're giving them a provenance, which then the wider media reflects for either malign or just whatever reasons. So that's part of what needs to happen. And in a sense, I mean, by now, I don't think the British government is, even under Keir Starmer, they've basically worked out there's no point sucking up to Donald Trump. There's no point antagonizing him unnecessarily because the Americans can still do damage to Britain. But maybe the rhetoric can be a bit more hostile, particularly, I mean, Trump with the midterms is going to be, very, very, his powers are waning. So it may be a good time for Burnham to come in and start attacking Trump because there is a constituency out there in Britain, and it's more than the constituency that is completely anti-immigrant and racist and has presently turned to reform or restore. It's just very reasonable. It's not extreme. It's kind of centre-left, fairly moderate, but it needs some kind of a leadership. And that's not being given at the moment. And taking on Musk, being more critical of Trump, being more tempered on immigration, maybe reining down the rhetoric. These are things which would appeal to a significant proportion of the electorate, which could see Labour, if it can bring them all together under one roof, could save the Labour Party.
How true, in your opinion, is the claim that the UK has become at least somewhat ungovernable 10 years after Brexit? How much has Brexit changed British politics?
With Starmer having his own problems and may cease to be Prime Minister sometime during this year, people have said, how many Prime Ministers have there been since Brexit compared to how many, in the 20 years before? And clearly there have been a lot of Prime Ministers, mostly Conservative Prime Ministers. That has been a function of the fact that the Conservatives, at least initially, didn't know what to do with the Brexit vote. They were completely divided. So that was a factionalism that really started spawning all these different Prime Ministers. And then with Liz Truss, I mean, I think there's very specific Conservative-related reasons, but they are related back to Brexit and what to do with it. So that's at a certain level. I think there are people who have an agenda that wants Britain to be seen as ungovernable. It suits their purposes to present Britain in those terms. I mean, there are people on the far right who constantly talk and predict a new English civil war. And they see things like the various riots that have happened, with Belfast being the latter one, Southampton more recently, Southport and elsewhere. They see them as evidence. But this isn't civil war. These are local disturbances over very particular issues which have been given a national prominence. And I'm not reducing their significance. But so there's more of that. But in terms of being ungovernable, Britain is still governable. It's just there are some basic issues, and they are to an extent related to Brexit, because Brexit, by most credible analysts, has reduced Britain's GDP by, I think it's between 3 and 4%. So the British economy, it's been harmed by it. And as a consequence, people's own standards of living have been harmed by it. And this has been going on before Brexit. So there are frustrations which have been taken out on immigrants in some instances, seen as the problem, which by that analysis, it's the economy that's the problem, and Brexit has made it worse. But that was a problem even before Brexit. In fact, one of the reasons for the Brexit vote was because since the financial crash, people's standards of living have been just either being reduced or just not moving at all. So there is a basic problem. The basic problem, how do we get the economy to grow? So there are frustrations. But that doesn't mean it's ungovernable. It just means government is a bit more difficult to deliver what most people want from a government.
Stephen, the far-right Reform UK party that we already mentioned, led by Nigel Farage, is now leading in the polls. I think we can call it a trend by now, if we look at the polls. What is your explanation for this, and how significant is it?
I think that actually relates back to what I've just said. There are frustrations amongst many people in Britain. Their standards of living have either flatlined or slightly degenerated, or they're just not going in the right direction. And that governments, the Conservative government and now the Labour government, haven't made any difference to that basic thing. So there's this idea, and it's one that's kind of common across different countries, comparable countries, that the two main parties have failed and that you need to go outside of them to get what people really want. So there is that basic feeling and frustration. And I think that's the heart of Reform's popularity. But there is also, because until at least very recently, and that's still the case, Reform's key demographic are men of a certain age, and certainly men and women of a certain age, but it's a bias towards men, older people. So there's an added element to that, which is they see change that they don't like. Right. This is a generation where more racist views are more acceptable. They've been brought up in a slightly different environment to younger people, because Reform does not young people at all. Their values are very, very different. So there's kind of economic frustrations, but then there's this cultural dimension on top of that, where people think that both parties, again, have promoted a change through immigration. And immigration becomes a kind of avatar for all the things they don't like, right? And cashing out far and wide in terms of things are changing and I don't like them. Blame immigrants. Reform is going to do something about immigrants. Very simple, short, sharp kind of response to that crisis. So there's kind of it's very clear what the reason is. The ultimate reason for Reform being able to be where it is today is the perception that both of the two main parties have failed. Labour had a chance because the Conservatives clearly failed. They were in office for 14 years and things got worse. By any metric, things got worse. Labour had a chance when it got into office, and it got elected on the basis of change. We're going to change things, right? And it failed to demonstrate change because people think, well, they've got in and what's changed? And in some senses, things have changed, but the people that have been attracted to Reform are so locked into the idea that the two parties have failed and they can't do anything about it. They're no longer interested in those relatively modest improvements. And immigration in this country, partly because of conservative changes to the regulations, but Labour has now enhanced those. Immigration is going down and may get to zero maybe next year. But when people are told that, they don't believe it. It's just like, no, we don't believe you now. Nigel Farage and Reform, they are the ones we're going for. And so whatever incredible things that Reform says, and even though they're morphing into a more hardline, extreme version of the Conservative Party, I mean, very difficult really to see what the real difference is between the two now. But because of Nigel Farage and his kind of Trump-like ability to not look or sound like an ordinary politician, even though he's just a very successful politician, I think that's also something that helps explain it. But I think the basic thing is the British economy has failed to perform in ways that many people would like it to perform and feel disappointed and betrayed by the two main parties.
So to wrap it up, a very journalistic question. Do you think there is any chance that Farage could one day become UK Prime Minister?
Yes, there is a chance because of our electoral system. I think it's pretty definitive that Reform can get about 25 to 30% of the vote. And in our bizarre electoral system, if you can get 25 to 30% of the vote across a range of constituencies, you can win lots of seats just with that number of votes, because Labour's on something like 17, the Greens are on something like 17, the opposition is divided. So in the same way, the last election, Labour won a huge Commons majority because the Conservatives and Reform split the right-wing vote. And Labour only got about 30% of the vote, but it got that huge majority. So on that basis, if things don't change, Nigel Farage could very easily become Prime Minister.